Hey guys, and welcome back. Here we are, man, Wednesday, time for another midweek motivation and advice video. You guys have seen the headline, right? I wanted to take a moment and talk about something that I think is absolutely one of the most serious problems that plagues our global population as a whole, but really targeting Western societies, and that's food addiction, right? Some people just don't buy into this idea that there's any such thing as food addiction, which I think is one of the major problems with this coming to light, actually. I do personally believe food addiction is a problem. It is an addiction exactly like any kind of drug addiction, crack cocaine, meth, any of that, as well as like alcoholism or any of that kind of stuff, except that I believe that it's actually more of a problem than any of those other addictions, right? Now, I'll try to outline that here in this video as we move forward. But just to try and get back to basics on it, right? If you look at the number one causes of death for Western societies, right? Really, those things tend to be obesity related, right? Tend to be overweight related and things like that. And I believe that food addiction is the cause of the obesity epidemic in these societies. And as we see, as Western societies and Western culture moves more Eastern and moves into other countries, even third world countries, right, you see their obesity numbers rise, and then you see the causes of death related to that obesity also rise proportionally to that. So I really believe that food addiction is probably the worst possible addiction that anybody can have. And the problem is that nobody's really willing to acknowledge it as a true addiction. And I think that that's for a number of different reasons. One of the major reasons, and possibly the most important reason why I don't believe that our societies or our people as a whole really recognize food addiction for what it is because there's no real medical treatment for food addiction, right? There's no, in other words, like with meth or crack or whatever, there's clinics, right? You can go to these places, you can get sober from it. They do what they have to do, if they have to strap your ass to a bed and make sure you don't take that damn meth anymore, right? And there's medical procedures to try and get off of those very addictive drugs, right? Same with alcoholism, right? There's AA, there's all kinds of different ways and support groups for getting rid of alcohol addiction. So what I don't see a lot of is there's not a lot of medical treatments for getting rid of food addiction, right? Largely because food addiction is a mental type of thing, right? As is most of all addictions. Now, it is true to say that some of the other drugs have physical properties that don't allow your body to just cold turkey quit on it. Whereas food, also does not allow your body to cold turkey quit from it, right? You need food to survive. So it's a little bit like being addicted to meth or to crack, but always having to have just that little bit of it in order to keep surviving, right? There is no point with food, unlike the other drugs, where you can just completely not take it anymore and be completely okay. Another point is people as a whole just don't take food addiction seriously, right? If you were to tell somebody that you can't have a drink tonight because you're an alcoholic or you're a recovering alcoholic and you don't want to trigger it yourself, there's a lot of support for that. There's a lot of people who understand that, and you don't get a lot of social pressure after that point, right? Same to be said for drugs and things like that. If you have issues with drugs and things like that and you're getting cleaned up, there's a lot of societal support for that, right? If you're out with friends and everything and you tell them, oh, I can't have this or I can't go there, I can't do this because those are trigger foods for me or whatever, you get a lot of pushback. There's a lot of social pushback on that because people just don't believe in food addiction, right? Now, I classify food addiction as something where food turns into a pleasure center for you rather than a fuel source. So mentally, you associate food, and especially trigger foods with pure pleasure, right? And you no longer view those things as fuel sources, right? I think at that point that you either are food addicted or you are well on your way to being food addicted. And I think that even if you're not obese, right, that a huge portion of our society is actually food addicted, regardless of whether or not they're actually obese. So that is another issue that I think that stops us as a people really recognizing and taking food addiction seriously. Another huge issue, right, is the food corporations that we have on this planet, right? And one of the top offenders of this is American fast food corporations. But there's all types of prepared food corporations, not just American food corporations, but just corporations that specialize in mass producing foods of some kind, right? Now, these corporations are around for one reason and one reason only: profit, right? So they're going to do what it takes to make sure that their food is addictive as possible, right? That means lots of sodiums, lots of sugars, lots of high fatty foods, just the things that tend to trigger people as a whole at the pleasure center, right? They're going to want to put into their product, right? Because the more that you enjoy their product, the more that you get addicted to their product, the more you're going to buy, right? And the longer it can sit on shelves, the more opportunity you're going to have to buy it, right? Which is a formula for just horrible food habits across the planet, really. And really, the only populations that are exempt from this are the populations that are too poor to actually buy those foods, right? The populations that have to grow their own foods organically and eat what they grow and hunt, right? Those populations don't tend to have the same obesity problems that we do. And I think that that is largely proportional to the fact that our food corporations are really not doing what's in our best interest as a whole, but what's in their best interest from a profit center. And that's a problem, right, guys? Because that's self-feeding. That's a self-feeding loop, right? The more addicted you are to horrible foods, the more you associate them with pleasure centers, the more you're likely to eat them, and in quantities that are completely and totally unhealthy for you. So the larger you're bound to get, right? Leading to the obesity problems that we see in Western society, which leads to the health problems we see in Western society, which leads to all of the death problems that we see that are currently increasing around the globe, right? So in my opinion, guys, for the reasons I've laid out, I really believe that the first thing that we have to do to get this under control as a people, as the human race, is to identify the fact that food addiction is an actual addiction. What I don't want to do is make it sound like as individuals we can't control ourselves around this type of food. I can tell you this: I had a huge problem with food addiction. I think that that's pretty apparent, especially when you look at my high weight of 412 pounds. But individually, I was able to take control of my life. I was able to do the things necessary to lose that weight and get back down to a healthier weight, and maintain that now for a little while. And I think that all of us individually can do that. The real problem is humans as a society, as a group of people, right, tend to get into groupthink and things like that. And I think that we've proven that, when we have these overly engineered foods, these foods that are just absolutely designed to not just be horrible for you, but then be absolutely positively addicting in every possible way, that as a society, we don't have the ability to really control ourselves around that, right? So there's only really two answers to that, right? There's either get rid of that type of food, right, through regulation or whatever you have to do to get rid of it, right, which, I mean, let's face it, we would have huge backlash against, or two, step up our technology game and find a way to alleviate the threat that those types of foods present to us from a physical and physiological standpoint, as well as mentally. If we can conquer one of those two things, then I think as a whole we will get past this whole issue that we have with obesity, number one, and number two, with the obesity related diseases that lead to death, right? If we don't conquer that, then I think eventually, just naturally, everything will self-correct, and those people that don't have the ability or the blessing of genetic high metabolic rate will eventually die out, though that may take hundreds, if not thousands of years. So yeah, guys, I think that's it for the video today. Like and subscribe, leave me some comments, let me know what's going on with you guys, and as always, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you later. Bye.